we came here to be set apart and to be perfect for the Most High, right? You know, He does not want next person to be perfect, but you got to remember that. He's showing you to be perfect for Him. You got to remember that. So any tribulation, offense, you know, you got to remember that's not other person, you. It's just eye on you and endure. And Most High show you, me. And that's want us to be, right? It is the hardest, it is a challenging for see myself. Am I correct? It is the hardest, challenging for, but this life, this community living, Most High is revealed to you, to you. It is a very, very painful process you're going through. Man, I didn't know about me. It's painful, but endure and thankful, and we get better every year. Every year, I see myself, find about myself. Most every year going through tribulation, come out of it. You know, purge. That's what I'm looking for. I love Most High. I'm His servant. He saved me. I serve Him until I die.
Everybody's inquiring, you know, how did Straitway come about? How did we get to this point? And they can tell and sense that it's like something is catching fire. You know, it's growing because they can see the happiness, they can see the joy, they see the peace that is being obtained. They can see we're very serious about this walk.
Well, thank you so much for having, being on the Berean Moment. I want to ask you, what was life like before? If you can just give us an overview or like a flyby of what was life like before you had your Berean Moment coming into this. And you started from your child. You can start from just kind of give me your child.
Growing up, I was always the oddball out, even in my family. I never really fit in. Always felt like I was lacking something that I should have and didn't know what it was. Was always kind of like looking for something out there. Just never knew what it was. That's one reason I always did a lot of different things and got into a lot of different things and learned a lot of different things because I was always searching for something, and I just could never find it until I found faith.
So, where are you from? Where were you born?
Northern Indiana.
Okay.
Basic Wabash County.
Okay.
And born and raised there until I went to college and the military, and then I spent most of my time elsewhere.
Are you the only child?
No, I'm the second of the youngest. My brother and I are very close. We were raised more like twins. Okay. We were only 10 months apart, so we were very close in age. So it was like having a twin. Growing up.
So what was your guys' religious affiliation, or what you guys grew up as a family growing up?
I grew up very strict Church of Christ.
Okay.
The old-fashioned strict Church of Christ.
What is that like? I mean,
there's absolutely no spirit whatsoever.
Okay.
They were all very much pressed scriptures and the word, but it was all based around their personal doctrine and theology.
Okay.
They didn't allow any instruments. Everything had to be acoustic when it came to singing, which is very hypocritical because then outside of services, the preacher's son was in a band and all this kind of stuff. But everything inside was, to me, always felt very hypocritical from what the word that they pushed and the front that they pushed as far as the way everybody should look and behave and that kind of stuff. And then outside, it was like a totally different world.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after you left your family's house, didn't you join the Marines? How did you get involved in the Marines?
That's kind of a story, but it boiled down to when I was in college. I'd had everything paid for as far as for grants and everything, and then halfway through the 1 year is they cut all the grants in half, and that's when they started offering and pushing the student loans. And I refused to take loans out to finish school, and so I left at mid-year that year, and I was just kind of hanging in limbo. And a friend of mine from high school was going to the recruiter station because she had basically already signed up. She had to go down to some paperwork, and she needed a ride, and she asked me if I could give her a ride. So I ended up going down, giving her a ride, and I ended up going in, and she didn't.
That's it.
That's kind of, yeah.
And so pretty much that's how you got into the.
That's how I got into it.
Okay.
Basically, I quit a really good job after school to go to college, and then when all that happened, everything dropped. They had already replaced the person that was doing my job, so I couldn't go back to that. And so I was just, like I said, I was just limbo.
Okay.
It was just something like, oh, well, this sounds good.
What'd you do in the Marines? How'd you?
I was aviation supply, which basically is logistics.
Okay.
And it's divided in two categories. You have, basically, it's overall consumable, what they consider throwaway items that you issue out, then gets used and gets thrown away. And then they have what they call repairable, which is what I was in, which is all the high dollar equipment like the rotary hubs, everything. Used anything that was from a few $100s to $100,000 and up. And then they also had the classified, what they called the clamp items. And there was 3 of us in our whole unit that was had security clearance to keep track of those items. And you had to know anytime they came in for any particular item, you had to know exactly where every serial number was at any given time. And so it's basically just all logistics.
So you served. You said you served about 8 years. 8 years you served. Did you have a family during that time, or
Yes,
was
I
it
did.
after? Oh, please, can you tell us a little bit about how long you were married for?
Well, I wasn't married for very long. I had both my children fairly close together when I was married. At the time I got married, I guess you could say I didn't know my husband as well as I thought I did. And after we were married a couple of years, a lot of things started coming out. And I basically found out he was a Satanist, and he was doing actual rituals and everything. And during that time frame, I had started a clothing business. And I would go in together with some of the other businesses in town, and we would 2 or 3 times a year do fashion shows at the country club. And during one of these times when I was out during the evening, I came back the next morning, I came back at night, but the next morning I was talking to my children, and they were talking about everybody laying around in a circle with a puppy in the middle with his belly cut open and all this kind of stuff. And there was a lot of things that happened leading up to that point in time that you go into personal denial on. You see stuff, and you got this thing telling you back in mind, telling you what's really going on, but you don't want to admit that's what's happening. You try and find any kind of logical explanation you can possibly find to explain things away. And then there's just a point where you can't do that anymore. And that was that point. And I took my children and left.
Yes. So when did you, I guess, have your Berean moment? Where from all of this stuff, when did you get to your Berean moment?
Well, actually, I would say there was a buildup really throughout most of my life.
Okay.
From the time I was very young, I literally could see demons physically, just like you were sitting there right there. And when I was real young, I would say things, or lots of times I'd get very frightened. and or like they were actually coming to attack me, and I would scream and stuff, and then my parents would come in, what the heck's going on? And no one believed me, and it got to the point where they took me to doctors to be checked out, thinking there was something wrong with me mentally. And basically the doctors would just say, no, she's just hallucinating, she'll outgrow it. So I basically learned to not say anything about the things I saw, the things that I felt, and things like that. And that continued on throughout my growing up at home. From, say probably at least mid to late grade school, I learned that if I read my Bible out loud, and actually I always reverted pretty much to the Psalms, 23rd Psalms, which actually is a very great deliverance scripture. I would read it out loud, and I found if I did that repetitiously, stuff would stop. And then as I got older, because I was at home a lot alone, that when everything would start up again, I would just walk around the house and I would quote it until everything stopped. And then when I got in the military, which I really truly believe, this is my personal opinion, of course, just as the Father, He knows us, He knew us before He created us, He already ordained us, He already set this out. I believe our enemy, Satan, the high Satan, also can recognize who he has put his mark on, who he has called, who he has chosen. And those are the people that he really, really goes after. Because I know, sure, when you talk to the saints that you've heard so many things that are similar. It's the same type of things, the same type of persecutions, the things that go on. And I really believe that he knows that. And that's why he always goes after them. And I believe that's a lot with my growing up, and then my ex-husband, things that went on with him, and the demonic things that went on in our house all the time. Again, it was just the enemy, whether he used him because he was already his servant, whatever. It was just another way to try and get to me. But I know that throughout my life, he had attacked me repetitiously. It was almost a guarantee that either on my birthday, just a few days before, a few days after, there was always something seriously physically that happened. When I say literally, I'm talking like drowning, have to be resuscitated. Being in accidents where my spine's been broken 3 places, all the ligaments ripped, and all this kind of stuff. I've had those kind of things repetitiously throughout my whole life, right on or around my birthday. And so when I say literal attacks, I mean literal attacks. But at the same time, the thing that has always meant so much to me is when I look back of all things that have happened, I can tell, even though back then I wasn't saved, I didn't have the Holy Spirit, I had a knowledge of the Most High, but I didn't have that fellowship. I didn't have, that's what I was always looking for, and I just didn't know that's what I was looking for. But through all that, through all the things that I did in my life, things that, I always had this nagging in back of me, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be in this place, you shouldn't put yourself in, you shouldn't be, did it anyway. That the Father always had, in a way, kind of like the hedge. The enemy could attack, he could do something, but he'd only go so far. And then it's like he wasn't permitted to go past that point. And I just think that's the way it is with the Most High's people. And I think the enemy knows who we are, and that's why he attacks us so much. But you hear everybody talk about, this, but it's like, it could have been so much worse than what it was, but there's like a point it didn't go past. And I've got so many of those times in my life that I couldn't even count them anymore, where I know the Father had his hand on me, even though I wasn't walking his path yet, and I wasn't serving him yet, that he never allowed the enemy to go past a certain point in his attacks on me. And that is, I think, what really, you want to say, was my Berean moment. Because I had, with my divorce and simply my husband in 85. Between 85 and 88, my life was just total blown out hell. But getting to that point, that's also the point I've pretty much, where you got so fed up, it's like you finally start listening to the Spirit and start letting Him lead you. And that was really where my moment was.
So how did you find Straitway Truth Ministry? How did that come into play?
Well, there was no Straitway Truth Ministry at that time.
Didn't even exist. Yeah.
Didn't even exist.
Yeah. So what did you do during that time when you came into your Berean Moment? So what did you do?
I had started studying the Word on my own.
Okay.
And I started seeking and looking for others of like mind. During that time frame, I just knew what I grew up in as far as the world churches, and anybody I had known, whatever flavor they were in, just it wasn't there. It wasn't cutting it. There was so much missing. I also could see out politically what was going on, the political realms, what the governments were doing, and all this. I could tell we were getting more towards that end time. And I knew there's no way that I can make it by myself. No matter how much I would prepare for myself, which I did a lot. Now they call them preppers. There was no such thing. I never heard the term prepping back then. But I was looking for others that had that same mind, because I kept thinking, had to have a piece of land, had to have something where we could live together, where we could help each other, support each other, supply whatever each other needed, that kind of thing. I didn't have the land. I had a lot of know-how. I put everything I could into supplies, food storage, things like that I could do in preparation for still looking for that group of people. And out of that, I ended up meeting someone in Fort Wayne who told me about some other people. Oh, they just think just like you. They're doing this kind of stuff. And ended up getting in contact with them. And they had a little church. Ended up fellowshipping there for 2-3 years. It was a hodgepodge of people that came out of every possible religion you can think of. Everything. There was people that were raised Amish and left the Amish, Worldwide Church of God, Catholic, every flavor of Christian you can imagine. It just literally was a hodgepodge of people that come out of everything that were looking for more. We ate clean, kept the feast days, didn't do the worldly holidays. The only thing we did not do was the Sabbath.
So you kept the feast and all the stuff, just the Sabbath you didn't keep? We kept
first day, their Sunday, as a Sabbath.
Oh, okay.
We didn't buy, we didn't sell. We would all drive up. It was about an hour and a half from where I lived. We would go, we'd plan on spending the entire day. Everybody bringing a dish. We'd have a potluck dinner afterwards. We'd all sit around and fellowship, maybe do watch some videos over some government or political things that were going on, discuss things. I mean, there was even people there that was Sacred Name. There was people that was White Patriot. I mean, when I say it was a hodgepodge of everything you can imagine, but yet they were able to fellowship together, which was really, really unusual. And but through them, I heard about a preacher down south that was on the shortwave radio, and I started listening to him, and that's where I came to the knowledge of the Sabbath. And like I said, continued to prepare, because I just knew somehow had to get a group of people together. And it was at a meeting that this other gentleman had, Louisville, I don't know, it was 95, 96, probably more like 96, something like that. Anyway, Pastor Dow was at that meeting.
Okay.
And that's how I ended up meeting him.
Okay.
At that time, they didn't have the community, but they were working towards that. I don't remember if they were living in that one house together in Gallatin or not, or if they were getting ready to move into something like that. But it was in that kind of time frame. And then I turned around a couple years, 2 or 3 years after that. I was in 98. It was at another meeting this gentleman had that.
Can I see what gentleman?
Stair.
Stair. Okay,
Stair.
Okay, that's cute.
And then I met Pastor again at that meeting.
Okay.
And it was shortly after that meeting that I got an invitation to come visit.
By whom?
Pastor Dow.
Oh, Pastor Dow. Okay.
Straitway.
Okay.
And then we came down, I don't remember, within a few weeks after getting the letter, we made arrangements to come down, spend a couple weeks, and then after that, we were home and then back down here for a couple, and then it was just, and that was like in, I think the meeting was in October. I think I came down in January the first time, and then shortly after Passover, we were living here.
Okay. So you guys came down here. You already been looking for community, fellowship. You find it here. So you've been here ever since. You've been here for almost 20 years. He says 20 years. So in that 20-year span, you have seen the humble beginnings of Straitway to where it is now. Did you ever imagine it would be where it is today from where you...
Back then, no. No.
What was it like back then? I mean, we take it for granted. This is all we know,
It's really kind of hard to explain without sounding funny. Back in the early days of the first several years of the community, it's like we were a cohesive family. And that's not saying we're not a cohesive family now. It was just a totally different era and time frame, and the way things was done, the way we interacted and things like that. And over the time, from him getting on FM radio and then shortwave radio stations, and then we got into deliverance, and then started having workshops. And then over the time for all of this, then we are now, we're a family, but we're a ministry now. And everything revolves about the ministry. That is the focus. Whereas we used to just be a family that had visitors occasionally. Now we're a living ministry, and that's what everything revolves around. So it's a totally different concept now.
So you've seen a lot. Now, being here for 20 years, you've seen people come and go. I've heard of the Great Divide, with the whole...
Well, there's been a few of those.
I know, there's been a few. So you've seen a few. I've only heard of the big one, the polygyny.
The latest one,
the latest one. But obviously, before I get to the polygyny one, because you being being a sister, I'm curious to see how you was able to overcome that. But you said there was a lot of those stuff. How did you weather through all of those different... I don't know if you can get into details, but just give me an overview of what those... You said there's a couple of divides before it leads up to polygyny. Could you just share what some of the...
Well, it's like you could almost sense it. Something would change in the preaching. Lots of times we would get a word from the Most High through tongues or something. And we could always tell we're getting ready to go through to another level. And every time we've done one of those jumps to another level, there's always been a major cutoff.
Wow.
And kind of goes back to us. It has to do with a made-up mind. Not everyone who comes to a community truly has a made-up mind. They may come because they think they're escaping the downfall of the economics, or they have so many things that's their real reason behind them coming this way, other than the fact that their focus is to serve the Most High, that is what they have dedicated their life to, that is the final bottom line for everything. And so when anything comes up or a change is made that hits them somewhere in their flesh that they're not ready, or they never really gave up to start with, they didn't really, die out to, that area will win. And all those little spirits talking in their mind about, I don't care, you wouldn't believe the people that left when we started wearing head covering. Just because they had to wear a head covering.
That was the right
I had to
thing.
cover my hair. I couldn't show my fancy braid. I mean, it's just, there's been so many things that were cutoffs for people. That area in their life or their flesh or their emotions or their personal opinion meant more, or actually it was their God. And so it was a cutoff point.
So when so you talk about this, so it seemed like when people start wearing head cover, that kind of knock some people off?
That was definitely, it's amazing, but that was really a big cutoff. That was one of our first great divides.
Wow, okay.
That came out shortly after that.
Okay.
So it was.
I believe it because I lost my family off of the head cover, so I believe you. So okay, so then you had that, and then if I get to the polygyny one now, you being a woman, and when that came out, I mean, or which one of those divides was a close one for you? Like, whew, this one I got to push through, or were they pretty easy? Because you said I'm gonna.
I won't say any were really a close. The one that I probably had the most, I won't say issues, but lack of understanding on my part probably was the polygyny one. But it wasn't, I never really thought it was wrong, because I've said many times, even years and years ago, they all had more than one wife. It wasn't, I never thought it was wrong. My thing was, I didn't necessarily, in the beginning, think it was necessarily for now. Not so much, like I said, it was wrong, it's just that we're in such a different time and era. I just didn't see how it could work. That was basically what it boils down to. I didn't see how it could work in our time and day versus, back then, because they were raised into that. That was just norm. That was, in many cases, expected. It's just, I just didn't really see how it could work now. And so I've grown in that myself, where I can say, okay, yeah, I can see it can work nowadays. Just it depends on the individuals, it depends on the people. Of course, I think it depends far more on the women than it does the men, because the women have to get their act together. They can't do the personal jealousy, they can't do the, the vying and all this between them. It has to really have a sisterhood, and I think a lot of the sisters, including myself, are growing into that, because we obviously weren't raised that way. We were raised totally the opposite. But I don't think it was ever really even close to being a cutoff for me. It's just I knew that was something I didn't have an understanding of. I had a lot of questions that I had to basically get answers for myself on, so I could have a peace about it. And
So, and I appreciate you sharing that. So you've been in this community. From what I've heard, you are a person of all, jack of all trades. From gardening to milking cows and goats, and everything from sewing clothes. And how did you get into that road? Now you have your own business here where you, I think, sell soap. Or products like that. But how did you acquire all this stuff? Can you explain how did you get involved in all that?
One, obviously, I'm a little bit older person. But even in my time frame, in my grade school, teenage years, I was raised even very old-fashioned for that time frame even.
Okay.
Both my parents grew up on dairy farms.
Okay.
My grandmother's farm on my mother's side, even at the time I was a child, didn't have running water. My father had ran electricity to the house, and it consisted of one light bulb in each room that you pull the light on. She had a summer kitchen outside that she did her canning in. They had a hand pump. That was the closest thing she had to running water. So they had an outhouse, and they had a little chamber room with chamber pot inside for nighttime use and that kind of thing. And so I grew up very old-fashioned. My dad was a builder. He was a mechanic. So I was always pretty much, when I was younger, or anytime I was underneath his feet, being his gopher and his runner and grab me this, do this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I even heard you do plumbing and electrician a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah. Now electrician's kind of, but I can do some basic plumbing. And he was very different in his teachings. If he taught you something, he basically let you learn something the hard way the first time, so you never forgot it. Like when I was getting ready to get my license for my own vehicle, he said he couldn't drive unless I could do all basic tune-ups. So I had to be able to do a complete tune-up, bleed my own brakes, change my brake pads, do my oil change. I basically had to do all the basics. before he said, okay, now because you never know when you're going to be out on the road and something happened, you have to be able to take care of it. So that's the way he taught things. So a lot of things I kind of learned roughly just helping him. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I did a lot of roofing with him. I did, like I said, I was a big gopher for him. So I saw a lot, and I tried to learn by watching, whether it been that, or like I said, growing up, we always grew most of our own food. I never ate anything from a store-bought can unless I was at somebody else's house. We did our own food, either canning or freezing or whatever. My dad hunted, I hunted with him, and so lots of times we ate a lot of venison and deer. Of course, back then we also ate other things when I was young, squirrel, rabbit, you name it. But so it was a way of life growing up that I did a lot of things, even other teenagers and stuff my age just really didn't do. You know, they had farmers. I grew up in a big farming community, so a lot of my friends, their parents, grew up on farms. Yeah, they helped with the cows or the hogs, or when it came harvest time, they'd help combine the fields and that kind of thing. But they were hands-on for the things that they had to be hands-on for, not because they were really learning. And like everyone in my family, both sides, on my dad's side and my mom's side, all the women sewed. And so I grew up around it, seeing it. So when I first went to do my first item, I didn't really need a lot of help because I'd watched do everything. Now, a lot that I learned, yes, I did on my own. I learned way past that just to do things because I didn't have a lot of money growing up. So I would do whatever work jobs I could do in the summer to earn money, and then I would buy the material and I would make my school clothes. Okay. That kind of thing. So it was just part of it was a necessity. Part of it was just a way of life that just built into other things. If I needed something I saw that I wanted to do, like I learned to embellish a garment, I taught myself. I get a book. I actually looked at it and read it because no internet then, no YouTube videos. No. And so a lot of it came about just, okay, I want to do this, so how do I do it?
I guess the biggest impact that this ministry has had on your life, if you had to, you've been here for so long, so what's the biggest impact that this ministry has had on you, or Pastor Dow?
Well, as far as Pastor Dow goes, I'd have to backtrack a little bit on a lot of the years when I was searching for this, coming this way, and even though I fellowshiped with a lot of other groups, other communities that are no longer in existence, I could see the good in them. I could see the bad areas. I always still, like I said, felt lacking. And one of my prayers to the Most High was that that I always asked him to please put me under a true man of Yah. Because even in a lot of things that I saw that was the good, I could see a lot of people and men, I don't know if it's, once they start getting people under them or start getting attention, they lose their focus on, they may start out doing it to serve, God and all this, that, but it doesn't, the focus ends up changing. And I saw that many times throughout the year. And I knew that this is the way I should be living. And I just prayed so much for it to be put under a true man of God, one that would follow his pathway that he set before him and wouldn't deviate from it. Because even as the word says, the blind lead the blind. If you have a leader, and I saw it so many times where people get so involved, then with the leader, it didn't matter what the leader did, they just followed. And they may start off good, but then they get really deviated off the path. And I've seen so many people lose their souls. And I didn't want to fall into that. I didn't want to not be strong enough or not be wise enough to be able to see a path being deviated, and because you get so attached to people, you want to follow, you want to believe they're not lying to you, you want to believe they're not going to mislead you or guide you wrong. And I just didn't want to fall into those things, and I just always prayed for, and that's what, when he sent me here, it was the first time in years, even though, like I said, I fellowship with a lot of other communities and stuff, that I felt a true peace. I didn't feel like I had to double, triple check everything that was said. I didn't feel, you could just tell that when Pastor was talking, when he's preaching or when he's teaching, you could hear the truth, and you could get that clearance in your spirit that it was the right way, and he wasn't going to mislead you. He wasn't going to misguide, take you the wrong way. And he is such an honorable man that you can see that he is so dedicated in himself to always search the truth. And in that, I gained a peace for the first time in my life, knowing that I was in a safe way, in a safe path, not as far as worrying about the people, but my soul. I felt safe for the first time with my soul and my spirit here, that I never had any of the other places, never.
So you've had the luxury of living with Pastor Dow for over 20 years, and obviously, this ministry do get a lot. Especially Pastor Dow gets a lot of charge levied that the women here are abused or oppressed, and you are a woman. You've been here for 20 years, and you've seen some divides for head covering to polygyny and things that you just didn't understand. And when you hear all these things being levied at Pastor Dow and knowing him, like you know him, what do you think about that? What do you say to those critics?
Well, there was a time in the past where at one point in time, a long time ago, when we had one of his first, it wasn't even Blog Talk, I don't remember what it was like a forum type page thing. We had a lot of dissenters that used to live here, come on, making kind of comments or whatever. And I used to get on there and I would go, I was that keyboard ninja going after him. I kind of got a nickname, hot-blooded, because they would really get me worked up. I would get really mad at that. And it wasn't so much...
you could comment on his...
on the forum page.
The forum page,
yeah,
okay.
I would comment back on
Were
it.
you here at the time? Okay.
And when I know people that were here, because a lot of these comments come from people... a lot of them come from people who've never even been step foot here, never met in person one time. So those kind of comments, you're just like, forget you. But then you have those that left here, or because they were disgruntled, they were found out for their true selves and they didn't like it, And here they were liars, cheaters, thieves, and you name it. And then they're coming and then leavening those charges of their behavior on pastor and then the saints here, and those are the ones that really get my blood pressure up. But at the same time, it's just they're going to get their due when the day comes, and I had to learn to kind of calm down on that, because they would really get me mad.
That's good. So 20 years long. You've shown obviously some endurance, and you've been tested, and I'm assuming you'll be continue being tested. But how do you explain your longevity? One of the themes here is the people that's been here for a long time is, what's your secret, or how do you explain the longevity you have had for all these years to still hang in there with all the things that's been thrown at this ministry, or all the things that have been thrown at you personally? How have you been able to stand the test of time? So people can understand what it means to be in this walk, how did you do it?
One, you can't let things get to you. And sometimes that could be a learning process to get to that stage. Because everything that happens, whether it's to you personally or it's happened to those around you or the community as a whole, everything is a test. It's how are you going to respond? And I can say that like now versus say 15, 20 years ago when some things would happen, like say you would get worked up over it, or you get irate, or you get angry at people or things. It's just you really learn to take things in stride. Not because you don't care as much as you used to care, but when you've been through things so many times, you start to see kind of how it's going to play out before it plays out. And so you just kind of sit back and let it play out and be at peace at it while it's happening. And I will go back again to you really have to have a made-up mind. It has to be something that there is no going back. It's not even an option. There's not even a door there. There's never. Because you've really made up your mind, and you're going forward. Does it mean you're going to have hard times? Yes. Does it mean you're going to stumble and fall sometimes? Yeah, sure. But it's all for a purpose. There's a reason things happened, and if you go through it and you let the Father do His work in you, each step of, even though it may not be you personally, you're still going to gain something out of that. You're still going to learn something. You're still going to get a little bit farther in your spirit on. You're going to get a little bit more wisdom on this area. And it's a continual growing process. And you just have to keep yourself in a learning phase, a willingness to learn, a willing to change. That's another biggie. Change can be really hard for people. You have to be willing to allow things to change. You have to be able learn, which is a learning process. Learn to allow other people to grow. I know I'm not where I was 20 years ago. And so if someone else is coming into the walk or even moving into the community, they're not there. They're not. You're going to see the phases they're going to go through, and you have to allow them to grow. Sometimes you have to allow them to fall. You can't save everybody from everything possible thing they're going to go through, or else they'll never learn. There'll be no growth there if you're always trying to keep everybody from stumbling or falling or hurting. So sometimes you have to learn to let people to fall. You have to allow them that growth range, and then just be there afterwards to help them.
So I know you've had children grow up here and everything, and and you're still here, but they're not part of that. How does that make you feel? How did you overcome? Not have. Do you feel like it's some people can say, man, like it was all for naught. You had your children in here, but.
Well, I think myself as a parent, and since I spent most of my time as a single mother, because when I got my divorce, I got it just before my son turned 2 and my daughter turned 4. So from me, so basically I was a single mother all their lives. And when you pour so much into them, especially like I said, a lot of times they were actually raised to come this way. And then for them to choose the world. Yeah, you go through a phase where like, what did I do wrong? Where could I have done something different? A failure phase, like it was all for nothing. I spent all those years, wasted years pouring all this into them. And for what? But it's, I had to learn myself as a parent. You can tell them everything right. You can teach them everything right. You can everything step by step, even according to the Word. But if it's not in their own heart to serve the Father, they're not going to. And you've got no control over that. He doesn't call everybody. And they were raised right, and if they choose to go out there and never ever return to the faith, at that point it's on them. They're adults. They were adults when they left. It was kind of hard to come to terms with that. It really was. But at the same time, how can I say, it was kind of a relief that, because when you're always worrying, you're always feeling like, what else can I do to keep them in the way? What else can I do? What else can, and I could tell at least the last year, each one of them was here respectively. I could see them going, and you're playing over this stuff so much in your mind during that time frame that when it was over with and they actually made their choice and went, even though it was heartbreaking, knowing that they're not, Straitway isn't the salvation of the world, but knowing they're leaving this, they're leaving the path, they're leaving that, is just like you said, okay, they're damning themselves, because they're not going to go out there and be better. They're not going to go out there and serve the Father more than they were here. They're going to go out there and get worse. And but when that time came from each of them, once you got over going over in your mind, trying to go through everything that you maybe could have or couldn't have, should I have, that kind of thing, it was actually kind of a relief to have it off my shoulders when I just finally just gave it to the Father. It's not in my hands anymore. They're adults. They make their own decision. Either you draw them yourself and they come, or they don't. And so when I finally came to that point, it was like a relief that it was just a big relief, and I could let it all go.
Do you have any regrets? I mean, I know you were talking about that, but do you have any regrets as we talk now about, coming in this way with your children, not being a part of this stuff? Because, I mean, I have children too, so I can relate to all that, going through all those phases and being relief. But you had them at a young age. You had them here, right? I mean, this should be 100% the end, right? But you just learned that there's no guarantee.
There is no guarantee.
But do you have any regrets or coming this way and raising them in this way?
No, not at all.
Okay. I want to ask, as you speak, there's going to be people watching this, the Berean Moment, and there's a lot of you, I don't want to say old timer, but veterans, the people who's gone before us and everything. If you had to talk to the next generation who's coming behind you, and just as you talk to me, but just what would you tell them? Because you have seen things that we haven't seen. We are the benefactors of what Pastor Dow and you guys that came along to support what y'all was doing through him. We're the benefactors. What would you tell the next generation? If you wanted to leave a last word or give them something to help them to do what you have done or even do better, what would you tell them?
One, I'm going to say it again.
Yeah,
you need to have a made-up mind, and that it can't be just a verbal acknowledgement. It has to be something that is settled in you, that there just is no other option. You have to truly be willing to kill off your flesh, because this is a very selfless way of life, and that is one of the biggest downfalls to everybody on the areas where they fail in, or where it ends up getting taken away in it, or whatever, is because it's something that they really couldn't give up. Not that it amounted to anything, but they couldn't die out in that one area. You have to be willing to die out. You have to be willing to truly be teachable. You can be very knowledgeable in areas, but the way you do things in the world don't always work on a community. You have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to learn. You have to be willing to submit. That's a biggie that many people think they're submitted, and they're not. When it's just some basic things that you can instruct somebody on to do or not to do. they have such a hard time doing that. It still has to be their way, which goes back to selfishness, not being willing to truly submit, not being selfless, not willing to truly die the flesh out in a lot of areas. And especially if they're thinking of community, people just understand the community comes first in everything. Yes, you are a part of that body, but it's the whole that everything should be done for, and that should be the focus of your mind, is everything should be done for the whole. I don't care if you're doing the dishes, I don't care if you're weed eating, mowing the grass, planting a plant, picking a weed, whatever. It should be done for the whole, on how it could benefit the whole. Not on, well, this is my yard, so I'm going to do a really good job, but when I get to the community area, I'm just going to do a half-dash slap job, you know. That really has to be even an unconscious focus. You don't think about it. It's just this just needs to be there. Because if that isn't there and you're thinking of coming to community, you're never going to work out, or it's not going to last, or you're going to be utterly miserable the whole time you're there, because you can't have the focus on yourself or me and mine. It has to be on the whole, and in that whole, you and yours will benefit from it. Because if you focus on yourself, you're going to have a very miserable time in a community.
I think you covered everything. I really appreciate you coming on the Berean Moment. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Bless you.